Hello, my name is Michael Coleman, and I'm so excited to talk with some of the creative team behind Obi-Wan, the latest series on Disney Plus. I'm so excited to have executive producer Michelle Rejwan. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you.
And we have executive producer and director Deborah Chow. Welcome, Deborah.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Let's go back and leading up to that point of announcing the series. Michelle, when did you first hear any mention of this show? What was the conversations, and then when did you guys say Deborah needs to be the one to carry the baton?
The thing is that all these Star Wars stories, what's so special about them is how generational they are. So, I think there was enormous affection for Ewan playing Obi-Wan in the prequels. But, that story had concluded, and obviously years go by, and there was always, I think, from, Star Wars fans, a desire to see that character again, a feeling that there is much more story to tell. And then as the years went on, I think it was it's been 17 years between Revenge of the Sith and our show, it came to our attention, to people at Lucasfilm, that Ewan had interest in playing the character again, which was absolute music to everyone's ears, because it was just the right time where the kids that grew up with those movies, had grown up, and, to them, these are their rock stars, in Star Wars, and certainly Ewan and Hayden Christensen. So when we realized, and at the time we were making other films, but, when Lucasfilm realized that Ewan had interest in playing the character again, everyone just started to get to work as to what this story could be. And, the development process obviously takes some time, but really what it felt like the heart of the story was this chapter that felt like it was missing between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, and that arc for the character in that time. And the moment that I remember, kind of officially, in fact, sitting with Deborah, was in Anaheim at D23, when Kathleen Kennedy and Ewan walked out on stage. And after so many years of rumors that he might return as the character, he finally announced there, with Kathy kind of saying, Ewan, do you want to play Obi-Wan again? Will you do it? And he said, yes, and the entire audience, it just felt so seismic, the enthusiasm and excitement around it. And by that point, Deborah had come on as our director and executive producer, and I'll pass it to her. But, she and Ewan really started to talk very early on about what the real heart of this story and journey for the character was going to be.
Deborah, what do you remember when they say, would you like to take the responsibility of telling this story, this beloved character? What went through your mind? What were your thoughts of, what were you excited about? What did you perceive as some of the creative challenges?
Well, I had just finished Mandalorian, so I was just a few months out from Mandalorian, and that had been actually quite a long journey, but a pretty amazing journey. And then this project sort of came up because the previous director had to step away, unfortunately. So it was both like incredibly exciting, the idea to have these incredible, iconic characters, and it was daunting. There's a huge responsibility that comes with these characters and with, telling this story. So it was definitely a bit of both when I first came onto it.
Yeah, there's something that's really special about this type of, miniseries, where we have 6 episodes to tell a story. It's a lot of time to develop character, explore new spaces. What in your mind did it allow you to do that you wouldn't have otherwise, and maybe in a feature length, or what did you perceive you were going to be able to maybe do within, the 6 episodes?
I think the limited series it felt very right for this series because it allowed us to have more time for character, essentially. And I think that's the great benefit of a lot of the television stuff, and also having sort of the bigger canvas. And I think especially with this story, because there's so much history, there's so much backstory coming out of the prequels, that, just to sort of explore that, and the number of characters that, have such a legacy to them, that it was really, really helpful just having more time to explore it.
And Michelle, for you, when you did, have that conversation, you knew you were going to greenlight this project. What was just the overall kind of looking back and the legacy of this character, and also looking forward, because there's so much technology that you guys have put into this show, from the volume capture to just where CG is today. It's a different world when it comes to storytelling. So what were you excited about in terms of what the world was going to look like for Obi-Wan?
The thing that we started to talk about really early on, along with Deb, was, this really needed to be cinematic, even though we obviously we're doing it for Disney Plus and streaming as a 6-part series. These characters were born in iconic, major scope cinematic worlds, and that's where they belong, on that grand operatic scale. So we did of course use the volume technology stagecraft and also built practical sets. We had some location work as well. So, and Deborah, coming off of Mandalorian, really not only knew the volume, but if you don't mind my saying, Deb, it was so exciting because she was so ambitious with how she wanted to push it into new territory. So that was also the opportunity here, was to take this technology that, she had learned, and we have all, of course, been learning on The Mandalorian, and what Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni had done, and really give it its own vibe, its own identity in this series that felt really at home with these characters. But it was always very exciting, number one, to, bring these two characters back together, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and of course, Anakin Skywalker, Darth Vader, with Hayden Christensen's return to the show. And that started to reveal itself as the real heart of the journey, this key relationship at the center. So when we had the canvas of a 6-part story to tell it across, it really started to feel so right, because Star Wars has always been about the intimate and the epic. And we really had the opportunity to do justice to both across 6 parts of the story.
That's great. Deborah, what is it like for someone being on the other side of the camera to step foot on the set of Tatooine when you're surrounded by detail, by characters, things that are familiar, things that we've never seen as fans? What can you tell just about being in your position of, trying to capture this familiar place but for fans, we're looking out in the background and there's details that we've never seen before. What is it like as a director to be a part of that?
It's pretty amazing. And I had obviously spent a year on Mandalorian, so it wasn't my first Star Wars set, but coming into, such iconic sets when you're rebuilding the Lars farm and, you're looking at every single detail. We're going back to exactly what they did and trying to match it as closely as we can. But at the same time, we were 10 years between, there's 10 years on either side. So it was finding the balance of it can't be identical. You know what I mean? This is a different point in these characters' lives. But I do think, for me, I do remember the first time for real when Vader came on to set and I had that moment where you're just oh my God, it's Darth Vader. And you just I definitely had a moment where you're how on earth did I end up directing Darth Vader? And he's towering, he's 2 feet taller than me. So it's pretty exciting.
The casting process, I imagine, for this is so unique because you have an opportunity to introduce new characters. I love what was done with, looking at so there's some pretty fun characters. You have Kamal, you have Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers, some pretty amazing guest stars. But then you also have the opportunity of, the Grand Inquisitor and some really just really interesting characters. Can you talk about casting and developing these characters for, fans that might know them?
I think that was one of the things we were really trying to do from the outset, was because we had so many legacy characters, that we felt it was important also to have some new characters, because I think one of the biggest challenges was we do have these iconic characters where everybody knows what happened before and after to them. So we really felt strongly we needed to have some new characters to mix up with them. But in terms of the casting, I think just having Ewan honestly at the center of it, to anchor of it, was just the biggest gift, honestly, as a director. He was more than just an actor. He was a creative partner in the show. And he just brings such a humanity and emotion and weight to it. So, we were incredibly fortunate to get this amazing cast around him, but, he's really the center of everything.
That's great. Michelle, talking about the character of Reva, she's just a bold, unexpected villain that just takes center stage. What can you say just about introducing new villains into the series, and also the just development of how the storyline, just talking about the development of introducing a pivotal character like Reva and how that played into just the overall series?
Reva was a character from day one we were all just really excited about the opportunity for. As Deb said, even though we had the most iconic villain at least to us, right, in our cinematic history of Darth Vader coming back to the series, we did have the challenge of knowing a little bit more or a lot more about where that story ultimately arcs in the original trilogy. So to have Reva as part of the Grand Inquisitor team that, that had been established in the canon, but had never debuted in live action, or have a character that really had in live action, a new one that was sort of, we didn't know exactly where she was going to end up. So it was exciting, I think, from our perspective to, number one, be able to spend more time with the Grand Inquisitors, introduce them in live action, but then also introduce this character that, as she starts to progress across the story, you realize has a very personal connection to this universe and to Darth Vader that we don't learn about until later, but it becomes incredibly personal for her. And, much like, the thing about both, I think in every aspect, the casting, the technology, the story sort of canvas here, we were really tied a lot to the prequel trilogy. And there was just so much incredible canon and story, fabric that George created with that trilogy that we were able to pull into this. And so starting to think about the experience of someone who might have survived Order 66 and what that does to you, and her finding her way into this Inquisitor team and in some way working for Darth Vader, who she knows, not everyone knows, but she knows is the person responsible for that pain, for that unforgettable scene, that we all remember. It started to just feel incredibly juicy. And also speaking to Obi-Wan's character, who has enormous, lives with this enormous regret, also recognizing he did what he needed to do, but lost really a brother and best friend in Anakin when he fell to the dark side, but then all the devastation he caused and feeling somewhat responsible for that. So here he's coming head to head with a character who's saying, yeah, in our 5th episode, saying, where were you? You were supposed to protect us. And I think Moses Ingram just delivers an incredible performance there. I remember it just getting chills because, just hit with that responsibility, and wish that, of course, the Jedi and Obi-Wan in particular could have been there to prevent that, sort of what's sort of underneath all of this emotionally for him and needing to face. So yes, Reva, she was just always an incredibly rich character. And then Deborah working with her, I think just delivered a really magnetic, a really unexpected, a really sort of surprising performance, because she's so unpredictable, and that's kind of what started to make her really fun in scene to scene. But Deb, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit more about Reba.
I think in large part, like as we continued with the development, it sort of became, for me at least, thematically clear that so much of what the show was about trauma, and it was about dealing with the weight and the responsibility and the choices that were made in Revenge of the Sith and the prequels. And, Order 66, if there was a pivotal event for our story, it was Order 66. And almost every character or major character for us was grappling with that, even to Leia and, what happened to the twins. So much of it, of our story, was about dealing with what happened after Order 66. That it became a really interesting starting point emotionally, because it was so character driven. It was about people that were dealing with something and dealing with choices that Anakin made, and what happened to the Jedi Council and to so much of everything that happened in the galaxy. So it was a big story to tell, in a very sort of intimate way for all these characters.
Something that I want to bring up in terms of, just a pivotal character would be, Vivian Lyra Blair plays, Princess Leia Organa. What is it like to work with a child actress that carries so much responsibility in terms of within your show? And she did a phenomenal performance. She's just like, she steals every scene. What was it like to work with her? And how did you want to represent this young version of Leia Organa?
That was definitely an undertaking. And I think Michelle and I probably saw every single kid between the ages of 8 and 12 in the universe.
Yes, and watch them grow over a period
and watch them grow as we kept trying to get to production. But, casting, trying to cast a young version of not only one of the most iconic female characters ever, and then in addition, played by Carrie Fisher, one of the most iconic women ever, is no small task, so it was really challenging. And with kids, like so much of what you're trying to find is just sort of the innate character and find it in them, because they're, oftentimes they're not quite there to be able to put it on fully like that. So I think the thing that we were really looking for is we were trying to find the balance of, having the wit and having the intelligence and the humor of Carrie, but not losing sight that she is a kid and that she's a person. We didn't want her to get too uber precocious and have it, just be sort of smart alecky all the time. So I think, we were really lucky to find Vivian. Honestly, she just kind of had it in herself. And that is no small order to be that young and to walk onto a set like that with such huge actors around you and knowing that you're trying to fulfill and step into those shoes. I don't think I could have done that at that age. And I think she just did an incredible job, honestly.
That's great. Michelle, can you help describe? We talked about, obviously we've seen The Mandalorian, we've seen Boba Fett, we've seen Obi-Wan, and there's so much storytelling technique that's being put in both I think behind the camera and in front of the camera when it comes to the sound and the visuals that ILM and Skywalker Sound are producing. What can you describe the process of having big picture and understanding that you're trying to deliver something that has quality of feature film, but then also like a lot of material and so many planets and new visuals that the audience has never seen? Can you maybe just share a little insight to just the scope and scale of everyone the team that's really involved to support this type of storytelling?
No, it's absolutely true. And, it's such a giant collaboration, not only to, do something of this scale, but with this enormous expectation, make it feel at home in the universe that but also the desire to push into new worlds and planets and meet new characters and creatures and frankly, just kind of feel as though you're not really thinking about it. You're just really immersed in it so that your brain's not turning on, but you really believe the world you're in effortlessly, the way that George set such an enormously high bar for. But, it's about, number one, obviously, your director, who is at the front of it all. And this is where Deborah, and I'll pass it on to her, in terms of assembling our team, it was so critical, to be able to find the core collaborators to create this world.
Yeah, and it's so interesting also as a director, and having gone through Mandalorian, and that was the first season, and it was so nascent at that point, that technology, and getting to train under sort of John and Dave with everything. I just always feel like it's so fitting though, because this is also part of George's legacy. George has always been at the forefront of technology, and when he did the prequels, he was at the forefront of technology and he was pushing. So it feels like it's sort of in the DNA, honestly, to me, of Star Wars, with the technology and pushing that envelope all the time. And it can be challenging, and you don't always know if it's going to work, and some things are more successful than others. But it has been part of his legacy, and so many of the technological tools, and like to the point of even just ILM and Sky Sound existing, are from George. We're using previs tools that are from him. We're using, post tools all over the place. So it's not just the storytelling and the characters that we're inheriting from, the Star Wars universe. We're also inheriting George's legacy of technology and innovation.
Yeah, I imagine once after The Mandalorian, you get a kind of a sense of the world that you have to work within. Something I do want to talk about, I had the fantastic chance to talk with Natalie Holt, your composer for this series. Just a phenomenal person and composer. What does she bring to the table? This is a big responsibility. You're coming off of someone like John Williams, who has themes and notable, cues that fans love. But then you want to introduce, the unique voice of someone like Natalie. What was it like to work with her?
She was wonderful. And, that again, no small shoes to step into, and obviously, once we knew that John Williams was doing the theme, those two had to work together. So, her task, which was not an easy one, was, creating a score that could work with the John Williams, the voice and the sensibility that is obviously so iconic as well for Star Wars, and particularly with so many of these characters, but to also sort of make it our own and have sort of a voice for the show that didn't just feel like we were copying something. So I think, we definitely went through a long process with it, and, and she had to work quite quickly, but, just being able to sort of creatively step into that world and take that on, I think she did an amazing, amazing job.
That's great. Michelle, when you think about how this plays into the I'd say a big picture of the Star Wars universe, there's a reason why you guys wanted to tell the story. There's a reason why, you guys could say this is worthwhile spending time with Obi-Wan. Obviously, you and I'm sure had to maybe think a few seconds. Do I want to, revisit this role? But for you, what do you appreciate just about this series? What does it offer your fans and audiences that maybe otherwise you wouldn't have been able to tell without using Obi-Wan as a center piece of it all?
No, that's a great question. And we really, all of us that were part of this, really felt an enormous responsibility to really make sure that we felt we had a real emotional reason to tell this story. As tempting as it always is to revisit your favorite characters in Star Wars, we wanted to really make sure there was a journey here, a story here worth telling that transcended that. And I think for me personally, and Deb can answer this as well, the return of Ewan as Obi-Wan Kenobi it was really the heart of the whole thing, the real reason to do it. And also once we found the moment in time for him that, he had a real journey to go on once he discovered that Anakin in fact had not died, that he had become Darth Vader and Darth Vader still lived, was a new, surprising, shocking revelation to him. And in his duty to both protect these kids, but also the galaxy at large, it just became undeniable that this journey existed, and the inevitable collision of these two characters was an event. And we all wanted to be part of that.
Deborah, I think, when you say you can never imagine yourself directing Darth Vader or maybe even a Star Wars, now that you've done it, there's so much just maybe muscle memory or things that you don't realize the experience that you've gained from it. How would you even summarize just being, 6 episodes in of itself? When I saw that you directed all 6, that in of itself is an achievement because it's no small task. What to you is your takeaway from not only Mandalorian, but now Obi-Wan? What have you learned from it, the process?
Those characters, honestly, it's really interesting because, you've got to convey so much just physically, and it's such a different way to perform and act. So anyway, learned that, but I don't know, there's so many things, honestly, between the technology, the universe, the storytelling, but I think at the end of the day, it does all come back to the same thing. And it comes back to the story. It comes back to the character. And at the heart of it is Ewan, and it is Obi-Wan's journey. And for us, I think, particularly as we went through all the development process, everything in the show for us was always geared at his emotional arc and sort of his character arc. And so everything that's part of it is supporting that. So, there's a million bells and whistles and whatnot, but it always ends up coming back to that.
Yeah. Michelle, when you think about looking ahead, and you guys say this is a mini series, only 6 episodes, but what keeps people from or within the creative team saying, well, we've kind of opened this can of worms of introducing Obi-Wan. Why not keep him in play? Where do you guys? How can you guys walk away from it and not feel like, oh my gosh, that was so much fun, it was such a success. Why not continue this? How can you be so patient with that?
You're going to get us kicked out of the limited series.
I know.
We can't answer this. We got to stay in that category.
This was, it really was always conceived to stand alone as the 6-part story. And, that it felt really like the journey, as Deborah described, for Obi-Wan, what really felt complete. And so it was certainly designed that way. Of course, your mind always wanders to the possibilities, and nothing would be more joyful than working with Ewan again, seeing the character return. But as we began this process, it's always about why. It's always about the story. It's always about really letting it reveal itself to be something worthy. But truthfully, it was always designed as a limited event, and we felt it was worthy of one. And, we're, I think, all very satisfied with where we left the character and feel like it was a real journey worth going on with him emotionally. And, the other brilliant thing about Star Wars and the way George designed it is there's always, of course, a hunger know more, to speculate more, to dream about what the possibilities of story that you may not see, on screen are. But that's also what makes the world feel so limitless and exciting, and always sort of like endlessly imaginative. So I think we also really like that it felt complete, and that So as tempting as it is, it was designed to be a limited story.
It was at the end of the second season of Andor, or after the first season of Andor, when I said, "Are you kidding me? Like, we're going to go in that direction?" That's what I felt about this season. Like, I know what happens next. We know where this leads, and so it's just like the connective tissue between these series is so much fun as fans. I just find that it's a wonderful format in terms of being episodic, longer form, to tell these stories, to have the time. I think what this team had done, Deborah, what you've accomplished in the series, to me is just. It's so exciting to be at this place within, storytelling and technique, and just having opportunities to spend time with some of our favorite characters. So, yeah, thank you both so much for your time. It's such a pleasure. Deborah, Michelle, go check out Obi-Wan on Disney+. I've watched it 3 times. It never gets old. There's so many small details you can pick up. Yeah, congratulations to both of you. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.